There's a special kind of hell reserved for people who betray their best friends. And my best friend? He booked himself a front row seat the day he stole my girlfriend. I'm not talking about a fling. I'm talking about the woman I was going to marry. So yeah, I made sure his ticket to hell came with a personal tour guide, me. I remember the night I found out. It wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no movie-style confrontation. It was worse. Quiet. The kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and doesn't let go. I was scrolling through Instagram after work and there it was, a photo of her laughing in the passenger seat of his car. Same hoodie I left at her place the week before. Same necklace I'd bought her on her birthday. And his hand was on her leg like it had been there 1,000 times before. I stared at that picture for a long time. 15 years of friendship. 3 years of love. All burned down in a single post. Most people, when they get cheated on, they yell, they cry, they drink themselves into a hole. I didn't do any of that. I just went still. Like a hunter the second before he pulls the trigger. Because here's the thing about betrayal, you don't come back from it. You can forgive, sure, but you'll never forget. And I had no intention of forgiving. So I smiled. Actually smiled. Because in that moment I realized something. He had taken the only thing he thought mattered to me. Which meant he had no idea what really mattered to me, and that made him vulnerable. And me? I'm the kind of guy who knows how to weaponize vulnerability. I didn't text him. I didn't call her. I didn't even like the post. Instead, I closed my laptop, leaned back in my chair and thought about every single thing I knew about him. His habits. His weaknesses. The skeletons in his closet he thought were buried deep enough to be safe. We'd been inseparable since middle school. That meant I'd seen him at his highest and lowest. And believe me, his lowest was a gold mine. I remembered the summer after high school when we got drunk on his dad's whiskey and he told me about the fake injury he used to get out of paying back a loan to a guy named Travis. I remembered the girl from college he ghosted after she found out he was still living with his ex. And I remembered the internship he'd earned by taking credit for someone else's work. See, people like him, they think life is just a series of shortcuts. And they're right, until someone decides to take a shortcut right through them. I started small. 2 days after that Instagram post, I ran into him by accident at a coffee shop we both used to haunt. He was all smiles like nothing had happened. I played along, even bought his drink. We talked about sports, work, the usual, like old times. But here's the trick. Every conversation was a fishing trip and I was reeling in bait. Where was he working now? How serious was he with her? What was keeping him up at night? He gave me everything without even realizing it. Turns out he'd been working at a small marketing firm, managing their biggest client. A real estate developer with more money than patience. That client was his golden ticket, and without him, my friend would be unemployed in a week. That was my way in. The first move was social. I made sure to follow the developer on LinkedIn like a networking thing. Then I started commenting on his posts, always with something smart, relevant, the kind of thing that makes people remember your name. Within a week, we were messaging about trends in the market. Within 2, I had his email. I didn't bring up my friend. Not yet. You don't burn the bridge before you build your own. Meanwhile, with her, I kept my distance. Not because I was over it, far from it, but because I wanted her comfortable. I wanted her to think I was fine, maybe even relieved she'd moved on. That way, when the cracks started showing, she'd have no idea I was the one holding the hammer. And the cracks would show. I was counting on it. If there's one thing I learned growing up, it's this. Revenge isn't about speed. It's about patience. The more patient you are, the more your target walks into the trap on their own. And my friend? He was already halfway in. 2 weeks later, the opportunity showed up on its own. That's the thing about people who think they're untouchable. They walk around with their blind spots wide open. He posted a story on Instagram. Him and the developer at some overpriced rooftop bar downtown, laughing, clinking glasses. The caption? Making moves. I almost laughed out loud. Making moves? Buddy, the only move you made was letting me know exactly where to hit. The next morning, I sent the developer an email. It wasn't anything obvious. No accusations, no name dropping. Just a friendly, I saw your interview in the Business Journal type of thing, followed by a casual question about a competitor. I wanted him to know I was watching the market, and him. We went back and forth a couple of times that week. By Friday, he invited me to a networking breakfast. My friend had no idea we were sitting at the same table, eating the same stale muffins, and talking about his biggest client without him in the room. That's when I learned something important. The developer was unhappy. Apparently, deadlines were slipping, budgets were ballooning, and my best friend was starting to look like dead weight. I didn't have to invent a problem. I just had to feed the one that already existed. That weekend I bumped into her. It was at the farmer's market, the same one we used to go to together. She was wearing sunglasses, holding a bag of fresh flowers, looking like the past 3 years had never happened. We talked for a minute, surface stuff, nothing deep. But I could see it in her eyes. She was curious why I was so calm. That was the point. Curiosity is a slow-burning fuse. You don't light it and watch it explode. You let it smolder until they can't stop themselves from reaching for the flame. By the time we said goodbye, I could already see the first hairline crack in their perfect little romance. Over the next month, I played both sides without either of them knowing. With the developer, I kept planting seeds. Subtle questions about whether my friend was the right man for the job, careful observations about competitors who were hungry for business. With her, I stayed friendly but distant, never crossing the line, just close enough for her to remember what I used to be. And my friend? He kept posting his fake perfect life online, handing me every detail I needed like a man digging his own grave and sending me pictures of the shovel. The first hit came on a Tuesday. The developer called me out of the blue. His voice was tight, sharp. He asked if I'd be open to meeting his board about some consulting work. I said yes before he finished the sentence. 2 weeks later, my friend was called into his boss's office. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I could picture it perfectly. The forced smile, the nodding, the sinking feeling in his gut when he realized the conversation wasn't about praise. That night he posted nothing. First time in months. And me? I poured myself a drink, leaned back and smiled. Because this was only the beginning. The silence from his Instagram lasted 4 days. That might not sound like much, but for him it was a lifetime. This was a guy who couldn't go 12 hours without posting a coffee cup or a gym selfie. 4 days meant something was bleeding. On the 5th night he called me. I let it ring twice before answering. "Man," he said, voice tight, "you free to grab a beer?" I almost laughed. "Sure, buddy. Let's grab a beer. Let's pretend you didn't steal my girlfriend. Let's pretend you're not calling me because your world's starting to crack." We met at a dive bar we used to hit in our early 20s. Same sticky tables, same flickering neon light. He looked tired, the kind of tired you can't fix with sleep. "How's work?" I asked, sipping my drink. He hesitated. "It's fine." Which meant it wasn't fine at all. I let him talk, about changes at the office, about the developer being hard to please lately. I didn't offer advice. Didn't comfort him. Just listened like a man taking notes in his head. When we walked out, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Good to see you, man. We should hang out more." "Yeah, we should." 2 nights later I made my move. It was past midnight when I pulled up to his house. The street was quiet, no lights except the dull orange glow from his porch lamp. I knew their schedule, she'd be working late, he'd be passed out after another round of whiskey. I let myself into the backyard. No one saw me. I'd been here 100 times before. I knew exactly where he kept the spare key. Inside it smelled the same, cologne, bourbon, and that faint scent of her perfume. I walked straight to the office. It hadn't changed much since I was last in it, except for the safe in the corner. Combination? Still the same birthday he'd been using since high school. Pathetic. When the door swung open, I almost smiled. Stacks of cash, documents, and something else, a small velvet-covered box. I opened it. Her engagement ring. The one he'd been planning to give her. I slipped it into my pocket, locked the safe, and walked out as quietly as I came in. He'd stolen the woman I loved. Now I had the symbol of the future he thought he'd have with her. And I wasn't going to keep it. I was going to make sure she got it, in the worst way possible. When I walked out of his house that night, the ring in my pocket felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't the gold. It wasn't the diamond. It was the weight of what I was going to do with it. I didn't steal it to pawn it or to keep it as some kind of trophy. I stole it because it was the perfect weapon, quiet, beautiful, and capable of cutting far deeper than anything I could say. The thing about revenge is, it works best when you make the target destroy themselves. And that ring? It was going to be the first domino. The next day, I booked a table for 2 at the most expensive rooftop restaurant in the city. A place she'd been posting about for months but never actually visited. Reservation under her name. I called the restaurant, told them I wanted to send a special gift to the table before dinner. "No problem," they said, "people do that all the time." And that gift, the ring, in the velvet box, delivered right to her hands with a card that simply read, "He's not who you think he is." No name, no signature, just enough to light the fuse. I didn't need to be there to see her reaction. I already knew how it would go. The shock, the confusion, the anger. She'd think he was planning to propose. She'd confront him about it. He'd have no idea what she was talking about. The cracks in their trust would split wide open. And while they were busy accusing each other, I'd be tightening the noose at his job. The same week, I met the developer again, this time privately. Over coffee, I casually mentioned hearing rumors about how my friend had mishandled a past client. I didn't outright accuse him. I just asked questions. The developer's eyes narrowed. He didn't say much, but I could tell the seed had landed. By Friday, my friend texted me, "You know anything about why the boss is suddenly on my case? Feels like they're digging into stuff that's not even true." I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "Man, no idea. But if you need someone to talk to, I'm here." The best part? He actually believed me. The night before the reservation, I couldn't sleep. Not because of nerves, I wasn't worried about being caught. It was anticipation. The same kind of restless energy you get before a big game, or before pulling a trigger you've been aiming for months. I sat at my kitchen table with the ring box in front of me, rolling it between my fingers. The diamond caught the light, throwing little sparks on the wall. I wondered if he'd picked it out himself, or if she dragged him to some overpriced jewelry store and pointed at it. Didn't matter. It wasn't hers anymore. It wasn't his either. The following evening, I arrived at the rooftop restaurant early, not to watch but to make sure everything was perfect. I slipped the maitre d' $100 bill and reminded him about the special delivery. He nodded like he understood exactly what kind of game I was playing, though I doubt he had any idea. At 7:10 she arrived. I was across the street, leaning against my car, sunglasses on despite the fading light. She looked radiant, black dress, hair done up, that confident walk I'd fallen for years ago. Only now, watching her, there was no ache. Just focus. At 7:25 he showed up. He looked good, I'll give him that. New suit, fresh haircut, wearing the kind of cologne that screams, "I'm doing well." I almost laughed. He had no idea his evening was about to implode. Inside, I knew the plan was unfolding. They'd order drinks, maybe an appetizer. They'd laugh, flirt, pretend they were the golden couple they liked to post about. And then the waiter would arrive. Velvet box on a silver tray. A card slipped under the lid. I didn't have to see her face to know what it looked like when she opened it. I'd seen that mix of shock and suspicion before. And I knew exactly what would come next. The questions, the tightening of her jaw, the way her voice would drop half an octave when she was angry. I gave it 30 minutes before walking away. No need to linger. The first domino had already fallen. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from her. "Did you know about this?" Attached was a blurry photo of the ring sitting on their kitchen counter. I stared at it for a full minute before replying. "About what?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally did, it was one word. "Never mind." Which told me everything I needed to know. She didn't believe him. Not entirely. Meanwhile, the other front of the war was heating up. The developer called me again. This time, his tone was different. Shorter. Colder. He wanted numbers. Proof. He hinted that if I had anything useful about my friend's work, it might help them make some decisions. I didn't hand him everything at once. That would be sloppy. Instead, I gave him half-truths, little stories about missed deadlines, mishandled projects, and complaints from smaller clients. All technically true but framed in the worst possible light. It's amazing how easy it is to ruin someone's reputation when all you do is rearrange the facts. By the end of the month, my friend was having meetings with his boss twice a week. He texted me again, this time more desperate. "I think someone's trying to screw me over at work. You hear anything?" I let the message sit for an hour. Then, "No man. But you've made a lot of enemies over the years. Maybe one of them's finally catching up to you." The cracks in his life were widening. She was quieter online, fewer couple photos, more solo shots. He was posting about long nights at the office, which I knew was code for damage control. And me? I was patient. I didn't need him to crumble all at once. I wanted him to feel it happening inch by inch until the pressure was so heavy he couldn't breathe. The first real break came on a Thursday night. I was at home sipping a beer when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. It was her. "Hey," she said, voice low. "Do you have a minute?" I played it cool. "Sure. Everything okay?" Long pause. "Can I ask you something, and I need you to be honest?" "Of course." She took a breath. "Do you think he's faithful?" It took everything in me not to laugh. Instead, I said, "Why are you asking me that? Just answer." Another pause, perfectly timed. Then, I think you already know the answer. She went silent. I could almost hear her thinking, turning the words over, trying to decide if I was protecting him or confirming her fear. Thanks, she said finally and hung up. That was the moment I knew the second domino had fallen. It started with a single email. The developer sent it to my friend's boss, CCing the entire board. The subject line was polite, contract concerns, but the body was anything but. Missed deliverables. Poor communication. Budget overruns. Everything I'd fed him over the past month, neatly packaged and stamped with credibility. I didn't need to hack into his inbox to know he was reading it in real time. I could picture the sweat starting at the back of his neck, his eyes darting to the clock, the panicked urge to start explaining before anyone even asked him to. By the next day the client was gone. Just gone. He tried to spin it online as a mutual parting of ways, but anyone in the industry knew better. Losing your biggest client isn't a mutual anything, it's a death sentence. At home things were even worse. She'd been quiet for days, but now her posts were sharp, passive-aggressive little quotes about trust and loyalty. I knew that style well. She used to post the same things when we fought. And then came the night I'd been waiting for. It was just after 9 p.m. when my phone lit up with a text from her. You should probably come get your hoodie from my place. He's in one of his moods. Translation, he's spiraling and I want you to see it. I didn't even bother responding. I just got in the car. When I arrived, the front door was open. I could hear them before I stepped inside, voices raised, hers sharp and fast, his low and threatening. You're lying to me, she snapped. You think I'm stupid? The ring, the late nights, the deleted messages. I don't know what you're talking about, he roared back. I stepped into the hallway, leaning against the wall like I'd been there all along. They both froze. Hey, I said calmly, I just came for my hoodie. Her eyes flicked to me then back to him. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The silence was its own kind of violence. He glared at me, really glared like he'd just realized I wasn't there to be his friend anymore. And that's when I knew, the third domino was about to fall. I left without the hoodie. Didn't need it anymore. Because now it wasn't just me against him. It was her against him too. And two people with a score to settle? That's a storm no one walks away from. Some people believe revenge should be quiet. A whisper. A shadow. Something you do in the dark so no one knows it was you. I'm not one of those people. After weeks of pulling strings from the background, it was time to step into the light. Time for him, and everyone else, to see exactly who had been holding the knife. I started with the one thing he still had left, his image. Despite losing his biggest client, despite the fights at home, he still walked around like the king of his little kingdom, smiling at neighbors, posting selfies at the gym, pretending everything was fine. So I decided to take that. The plan came together faster than I expected. The developer still had the final invoices from my friend's firm. Invoices that, with a little digging, showed some creative accounting. It wasn't outright fraud, but it was sloppy enough to make people question his ethics. And questioning someone's ethics is the fastest way to make their whole life collapse. I asked the developer if he'd mind sharing those invoices with a few people in the industry. Just for context, I said. He agreed. 2 days later, screenshots of those invoices were circulating in a private Facebook group for local business owners. By the weekend they were on Twitter. At the same time I sent her a message. You deserve to know everything. Meet me at 6. I brought the receipts, literal receipts. Copies of texts he'd sent other women while they were together, screenshots of dating app profiles he'd been using, even photos from nights he claimed to be working late. I didn't tell her what to do with them. I didn't have to. That night, she posted a photo of the ring on Instagram. Caption, found this. Not interested. The comments section turned into a feeding frenzy. Friends, co-workers, even mutual acquaintances piling on with stories about him. I didn't write a single word. Just watched. The next morning, I knew the endgame was here. He called me, first time in weeks. Voice hoarse, broken. What the hell did you do? I smiled into the phone. Nothing you didn't deserve. He cursed, shouted, tried to threaten me. I let him burn himself out, then hung up without another word. That Friday, I made sure to be at the same bar we used to haunt, same sticky tables, same flickering neon light. I was halfway through my drink when he walked in. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of everything had crushed the man out of him. He saw me. Stopped. For a second I thought he might walk over. But he didn't. He just turned around and left. I finished my drink, left a 20 on the table and walked out into the night. Some people say revenge doesn't change anything. Maybe they're right. But as I stood there watching him disappear down the street, I realized something. It doesn't have to change anything. It just has to hurt enough. And this hurt perfectly. 2 months later, his name wasn't in the papers. It was in the rumor mill. And in business, rumors are deadlier than headlines. The whispers said he'd been dropped by every client he had left. That his lease on the office space had been terminated for non-payment. That he was trying to sell his car just to cover rent. I didn't verify any of it. Didn't need to. When your world collapses, people can smell it. She moved out within a week of our last meeting. Last I heard, she'd gone back to school, picked up a new job, and blocked him on everything. She never contacted me again, and I never expected her to. We weren't friends, not anymore. But we'd shared something rare, a common enemy. And sometimes that's enough. One rainy afternoon, I walked past the coffee shop we used to sit in after work. He was inside. Alone. No laptop. No papers. Just staring at the wall, nursing a coffee that had probably gone cold an hour ago. For a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered the night I found out he'd taken her from me, the smirk on his face, the casual cruelty in his voice. And just like that, the sympathy evaporated. People think revenge is about the moment, the big reveal, the explosion, the final blow. But it's not. Real revenge is quiet. It's the silence that follows. It's knowing that every morning he wakes up in a smaller life with fewer friends, less respect, and no way back to the man he used to be. And I don't have to lift a finger anymore. The damage is permanent. He did the rest himself. That night, I poured myself a drink at home. Sat in the same chair where I'd planned it all weeks ago. I thought about calling someone to celebrate. Instead, I raised the glass to no one in particular. To the price of betrayal, I said aloud. And I drank to the last drop.